All right, and welcome to the Beyond Coaching Podcast. You got your co-hosts here, Max and Zach. Today we've got Ed Johnson, Athletic Director at Fortified Strength in San Ramon. He's a national USAW coach and the rare gym leader who went the nonprofit route. He's built a thriving youth program with over 70 athletes and national level lifters, all inside a nonprofit model. Today, we're breaking down how he did it and the lessons he has learned along the way. Ed, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate being able to share some of the information and knowledge we have over the years. And hopefully somebody can find some value out of it.
Definitely, man.
Nice.
So you started as a wrestler, you dabbled in CrossFit, gymnastics, even running, nonprofits. What path brought you into weightlifting full time?
It was kind of like my own path. Very early on, I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Like later on in life, doing CrossFit was actually hurting my my blood sugar levels. When I started weightlifting, found that my blood sugar would go down. So I just started weightlifting every day and just adapted to that and just got into it and got into the weeds of it. Started like a 12-week cycle and just had at it by myself in the gym for a couple of months.
I found CrossFit
awesome.
hurt my blood sugar levels too. It was making them go down. I try to keep them topped up, elevated as high as I can. CrossFit really cut into that. Yeah. So I had to stop it.
That's actually interesting though. So you found out about your type 1 diabetes later in life. Usually, isn't that like an early child diagnosis type of thing?
It was. They couldn't even really find what was going on at the time. And then they just did some blood tests and then they said, "Hey, did you know you were a type 1 diabetic?" I was like, I had no idea. I've been living my life for this whole time.
That's crazy. Because I would think did you do a lot of athletic stuff when you were a kid?
Yeah. I was very athletic. I was, at the time I was still coaching wrestling. So I was very active with that, and coaching wrestling and still doing CrossFit quite a bit.
That's wild.
Yeah. I lost a lot. I lost like 15 pounds and so skin was hanging off of me. And I was like, I had to go to the hospital, I was like using the bathroom every 30 seconds and said, yeah, you're close to having hyperglycosis, like almost going to a coma. So it's been so long. But yeah, it was very interesting to find it very later on. And then got into weightlifting because of it, because it just helped my blood sugar so much.
Wow.
Yeah. I have my aunt wears one of those monitors. She's not even like diabetic or anything, but like she'll eat dinner and be like, "Oh, got to go walk around and do push-ups." And it's like, it's super annoying, honestly, but it's a thing. It's a thing. There's been mass adoption.
Yes.
Damn.
Yes.
That is wild.
That's crazy. So you chose a different path, than most gym owners. You chose the nonprofit route. Can you dig into why?
So before even really getting into CrossFit, I was a director at a nonprofit. It was a recreational gymnastics facility. And in the recreational gymnastics facility, they had an outreach program for inner city kids in San Francisco. And I worked with them for a number of years. I want to say about 4 years I worked with them, just teaching gymnastics and learning the ins and outs of a nonprofit, of some of the benefits and ways that it can help, help youth and help people that are in need. And also, just the benefits to have as an organization, like a board and a group of people. Of course, the tax benefits as well too. But I found it was very useful than just going in as a sole proprietor ownership of a gym.
Nice.
Definitely.
What was your intent when you started like the nonprofit? Did you just decide, hey, I want to do something like this, versus like you wanted to like start your own team and have a business? Like why? What was the like deeper motivation behind all that?
That is a great question, because at the time it wasn't really sport specific to weightlifting. I just was enjoying weightlifting a lot. I had a pretty talented athlete I was coaching at the time. One of my first national meets that I went to was the national championships in Michigan. Yeah, so I went out there to that one for the first time in 2018. And I just started like a group. I said, hey, I was working at a CrossFit gym. I'm going to start this group of youth that wanted to do weightlifting and just, teach weightlifting because I enjoy it, right? And I have an athlete that I need to have a group around them and have the team around them because I come from a team sport. So I started with that, added the group in there, tons of interest of more youth wanted to compete and
Nice.
feel strong. And so we went to our first national meet as a team in 2019 in Anaheim in California. And that kind of was the initial fire to set off was like, oh, okay, there's a lot of kids that actually want to do this and actually want to get really, really strong in our area. We don't really have a ton of people, at least in the area that I have. If you wanted to, you had to travel down to where you were at, Max, or down to, San Francisco, where Kevin Doherty was at. It wasn't anything on the side.
Where did you start? Where were you?
In San Ramon. So I was in San Ramon when I was teaching.
Oh, you were in San Ramon.
I was in San Ramon, yeah.
For those of you that don't know, are you still literally right across the street from California Strength?
I am. I can see that. But they were dabbling in more professional weightlifting at the senior level at the time, and they had a lot of heavy hitters there. With a couple of youth sprinkled through that, and they didn't have just like an area there. So I was getting a group of kids that weren't the most athletic. They were just coming from different backgrounds. I had a few that were playing other sports, but not very many. That just wanted to dabble into a strength sport. And knowing the kind of ins and outs of having a nonprofit, I said, hey, you know what? We can create a mission statement, make it something that we really want to drive home. Like, this is something for the community. Let's start a nonprofit up and be able to establish ourselves as a nonprofit, because since we're a smaller organization just in a corner of a CrossFit gym, I couldn't buy a building and do any of that stuff. The only way to keep ourselves as a unit and a group and something independent was to organize ourselves as a nonprofit, at least in my time, at that thought process there, because it was easier for the gym to kind of like digest, right? That I'm not just making money on the side as a for-profit business, that I'm actually here for the community. And I'm still coaching CrossFit in that time. So they would be able to donate, and it was like a branch off from their gym as another organization that was just predominantly used. So it wasn't a competing brand.
Nice.
Yeah. That's and cool. I know being a nonprofit, most gym owners drive Lamborghinis and, they're stacking capital. Max, how many Lamborghinis are you up to these days?
Well, I have 2, so I can race them. You always got to have 2.
Yeah.
I know on the finance side, obviously joking aside, on the finance side, you mentioned, you can get like a school district email list. You have some donor matching opportunities. Talk about some of that stuff.
Yeah. So the great part about it is that, raising capital, right? And raising capital was kind of a huge thing of starting a gym. And I just needed weights and plates and barbells and things like that, right? So raising capital. Fundraising was an easier way to do it. We're in, like I said, an affluent area here where I can get matching donation from other, companies and organization. And that was the thought process, to say, hey, let's leverage the community that we're in, allow them to be able to donate to a nonprofit that they can get tax write-offs off and so forth, that they can be involved of a gym that's going to help youth. Fortunately, we got like an angel donor that donated quite a bit up front, and really worked out in our favor. But it allowed us to be able to continue that growth with other companies and other organizations, to be able to allow us, because it allows us to work with other organizations with tax write-offs. We get discounted and sometimes free advertisements for certain places, which is huge. Payroll taxes, if I start hiring coaches, which I did eventually down the line, it was going to be able to allow me to pay my coaches a little bit more and establish them.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Do you feel like having a nonprofit affects the overall way that you approach coaching people? For example, if you've got a gym, you're a little more likely to bend over backwards for people and kind of pull them in and try to do what you can. You want customer service to always be high. With a nonprofit, it's a little bit more, you have a little bit less of the requirement of like, they're not paying you. So like, you're not just like delivering something different or something lesser, but maybe something different as far as like, you're pushing people a little bit more, or you're trying to get them to achieve things. So you have a little bit different demeanor. Does it affect how you operate the gym as far as the day-to-day coaching?
I've seen it in the past where it has affected it. And this is kind of important for us. And this is important, I think, for all organizations that are in. We run it as a business, right?
Right.
Customer service is first. We're driven by that model, because a lot of the revenue that comes in is tuition based, meaning that people pay for our classes. So we have a lot of members that are paying what we call the market value of our classes, which is we're a little bit below what market value is for our area. But it's still, we have like what we consider market value. So they still pay us. We treat it as a business all the way through, and we get majority of now, right now I could say we are pretty much self-sustaining, because we bring in enough athletes in. We don't need to do a whole lot of fundraising. So we run it as a business. I think people get into the trap of nonprofits when, they get a lot of grants and they rely on grant writing and fundraising. And I think they get in that trap. And that's why a lot of them don't succeed as well. But we treat it as a business. So I treat it just as if it would be a for-profit gym. So
Nice.
customer
Yeah,
service.
my wife works for United Way, the Orange County chapter, and she runs their events. And so like I see sort of the inner workings of it's very similar to corporate America. Like it's not super dissimilar, but I'd say where it's a little bit different is I've noticed a lot of nonprofits maybe have like bigger leadership teams that they probably need. Maybe, they're not as like efficient sometimes as like something that's for profit because you want to be lean and strong. If you're a for profit, when you're nonprofit, maybe there's less financial incentive to be lean. Like one of the things I was wondering, maybe you can allude to this a little bit is like, when I hire a coach, like I have to look at profit margin. So if I pay a coach X, I need to make sure I'm charging X for this to make sense. How has that impacted maybe your coaching? You don't need to maybe you can get into specifics if you want to, but like even just like from a profit margin standpoint, or margin standpoint, how does that influence your decisions on expenses like payroll?
So great thing about it is that we do take that into account. Like if we're going to increase hours or bring someone on, we look at the overall budget and see if the budget can handle that. And we have a good amount of surplus. As a nonprofit, we manage that surplus a little differently. We can't have too much just hanging out in the bank for no reason. So we have to there's a lot of expenditures to do. So we try to be right on the mark where we're just breaking even for a lot of it. So there is no excess profit. So at times we have that. So then we'll say, hey, we can add a service. So we'll do a lot of that surplus in that manner, in that way, where we look at the profit, like you said, profit margin. If I bring someone on to coach's class, the only leeway that I have is that I can invest early on and not have to necessarily worry about it, because if I have reserves, I'll say, okay, I know that I might not bring in X amount of dollars the first month, but that's okay. Right. This is already built in. And for me as a coach, for me right now, it's just time, right? Because through the nonprofit, I'm a salary employee. Not a whole lot on the payroll. If I decide if I was going to add an extra class or put something else in and put more work in, doesn't really affect the time. But if I was going to hire a coach, we look at what it costs annually. Can we sustain this over the course of the year for this year in this block for what we're bringing in? Do I need to up the numbers a little bit more? Like, okay, we have cap on our classes. Do I need to expand the cap on the classes because I'm bringing the coach in so we can bring more revenue in? We do look at all those things as we go forward into it. Like I said, we do get a little leeway because we have a nonprofit surplus sometimes, and we don't use it as for profit margins because we build all that stuff in. If we need equipment replacements, it's all built into our budget. But if we have okay, actually we actually can afford this for this next year and to put us right where we need to be. So we're not in the red.
That's awesome.
How do you feel like, because obviously in a for-profit business, like I'll take my business, my gym, for example, I'm obviously highly incentivized to work harder, push hard, do all these things. And if someone was like, yeah, you can make 2x the amount of, money, Zach, you just have to work 2 times as hard, I'd probably do it. With your situation, you're operating as if you're an owner. Obviously you're the athletic director, but how does your compensation work? Do you have to get board approval? Are there just increases? How does that work? What do you get out of this? Other
That's
than
fun.
just being an awesome coach and helping kids?
I mean, that's the driver, right? And that's the mission. And I think that's what's important to think about too. If there are ever any increases, right? And we always look at the mission statement. What is our mission to drive, right? If the mission to drive is to help 10 more kids and that, go from 70 to 80, it's like, what does that look like? If we're going to add any of those things. And if we do that and it looks great, if that's successful, at the end of the year, we look at it, it's like, wow, we kind of got a surplus. Board goes and proves, it's like, hey, you think this Ed guy deserves a raise? I don't know. You know what I mean? And that's how a lot of that stuff. So it is incentivized for me, but I have a lot of passion in this project and what we do here. The increases are great if the organization is doing well, but I can keep doing this way for as long as I can at the moment. Right now, we're in a really good spot. I don't really have to change anything as far as profit margin and things of that nature. I get paid pretty well to be able to live a lifestyle that I love to live, and I can just keep it going. I think the only thing that really drives me to continue to do better and do more things is be driven by our mission statement. How much more can we do with what we got?
Yeah. What's interesting to me, real quick, I'm really intrigued on this. It's like, what's interesting to me is, do you feel like you can be a better coach because you're worried less about like revenue and targets and margins? And like, I find I'll speak to myself, but I know Max has gone through the same thing. We almost have to be business owner first most of the time, because if we don't, we don't have a gym to coach in. Whereas with you, yes, numbers and budgets, obviously they matter. And if you don't have those things, then you don't have an organization. But Do you feel like there's less pressure and therefore you can coach better?
100%, right? Because it's not just me, right? Like I don't even sit on the board, but I am in the board meetings because they value my feedback. So I don't even really, funny enough, I actually can't make the final say on if we're going to do something or not, right? Believe it or not. But they just highly take in my input. And it takes a lot of pressure off me. I have, a treasurer, I have a secretary that does all this stuff. I have, parent volunteers for admin because they can volunteer their time and use the time to use against to help them if they have time requirements for volunteer work at their job. So they just put that into their equation. So they volunteer, or just I have parents that just want to volunteer a lot of times. So I have a lot of pressure that relieves off of them, and I have a really good CEO and president of the board that takes care of a lot of the finances at the moment right now. I don't know if he decides to transition on, if I need to find someone else and what that looks like. But right now, like I said, there's a group of people. We have, like I said, we have a board of 5 members on it. And we all are sitting down, we all have our roles, and we take part of whatever the organization is doing, whether it be building upgrades, whether it be equipment upgrades, whether it be how the services we're delivering with our youth. We have those conversations as a board.
Nice.
I like that. No, that's such a good question, because it's like, it really does answer this question. Like there's 2 jobs in place, right? There's being a coach and there's running a gym. And if it's a one person thing, it's always this push pull of like, you want to run a gym a certain way, you want to coach a certain way, you want to do certain things to sort of get the best result, right? And sometimes like coaching the top athletes to like get to a big competition is just almost like, it's almost at odds with making money, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like you're fighting this stuff of like dedicating time without getting paid. You're going to meets you don't get paid for that cost you money, like you end up investing money ultimately in this person to get them to the next level. And the payoff is different, if you do succeed, but it's so at odds with the idea of like, hey, can we make our classes more efficient? Can we add more coaching? Can we get more people in the gym? And it's so cool to hear that hear how that affects you. The question I was going to ask was just as simple as, what is your mission statement? What is the mission statement of you guys?
Yeah, I actually pulled it up. It's verbatim on our website what our mission statement is, and the mission statement is to combat teenage delinquency in youth via weightlifting and strength and conditioning, and that's basically what we're classified for as under the nonprofit guides is to do just that. And as that is the main vehicle, like I said, the whole point of it was it's just to have introduced weightlifting to kids and have them lead healthier lives. It's turned into, there's a lot of kids that don't like football, soccer, basketball. There's these like odd kids out here. It's like, hey man, I'm very strong and I like to lift heavy weights. What can I do with it? And I'm like, I got a spot for you right on my team, right? You know what I mean? So that apparently there's a lot more kids out there like that don't really identify with those other sports that find a home here. So, and that's, been kind of like our philosophy going forward with it. And like you said, I'll get a couple, high level athletes that want to compete. They can roll into the team that we already have set. We have a budget for travel and all those other things that are already set that we fundraise for ahead of time. All that stuff is all taken care of, so we don't have to think about it. Have coaches that stick behind and run our classes to keep them running. And just kind of all the logistics stuff, because we have a team of group and people that are put in place to do that. That allows me to, I have some high level athletes that I can focus on a little bit there and continue to drive that mission statement home, as long as we are doing well as an organization.
So, you probably have the largest kid program that I've ever seen. Max, I don't know if 70 kids. I haven't seen any other weightlifting coach have that many kids.
It's definitely up there.
Take us through your framework for developing kids from, 8 years old on to like high school.
We're still building it. And so we're only about, 4 or 5 years old. So we're still building it. So I still have kind of these pockets of athletes that I have, but ideally I have we call them our Energize group. They start at the gym anywhere between 5 and 9 years old. And it's just an intro gym. They just come in, they meet the coaches, they do some things, they run around, they have a stick that they'll do PVC pipe drills. Some of them can do a little bit of resistance depending on if they've done sports or before in training, but for the most part, a lot of them are just learning movements, learning to run and jump. As they get better and they transition, we transition into like our intermediate group, which is actually formalized training, mostly focused on snatch and clean and jerk. You learn a little bit more nuances of the sports. And then I have what we call like kind of like a national team, and they kind of move on to that next group. And they move into like more complex lists and things like that. And they do more accessory work. They put more time in the gym. They do, bilateral stuff, things like that, where it's less teaching, it's more of development. And I've learned this from when we coach wrestling. It's the same system almost. They have verbatim the same thing. You have your we call them school age group, which is elementary. Then we have our middle age group, which is middle school kids, and we have our high schoolers, and they're all transition. They go from one place as a club, and then you transition. Usually, it changes hands and coaches, where like you have a development youth coach for that group, then you have a middle school coach, and you have your high school coach and club coach. It's just me all the way through for the most part. I have some assistant coaches that been working on and developing, and they're in there with the rest of the kids. And now I'm finding that we're even getting to a spot now that part of the development process is now that we have little cohorts or groups that might be accelerating faster than some of the other kids. And so I assign cohorts to groups of different coaches. So like I said, it's still kind of a system that I'm developing, but the general basis is they start at that Energize, kind of work their way out the system. I have kids I have a couple of kids that have been through that whole process in the 5 years. And now they are competing at a national level and podium at a national level, starting at that small group there and developing all the way through. It seems like a really good system. It's kind of like a farming system, as you would, like, because they know this. So even if they drop off for a year and go do another sport and they come back, they retain a lot of that information. So we can get back to them very quickly if they even take some time off.
Nice.
Definitely.
Nice.
Or as these kids get into high school, I mean, they're going to excel. And if they decide to do like a team sport, I don't see why they wouldn't be well above their peers. Have you seen that yet?
Yeah, we definitely have some football players and some wrestlers come through our program and develop really, really fast. And to a point to where like, okay, they got in the tools to use what they wanted to use, and they've taken and applied it in their high school weight room.
That's awesome. That's super epic.
Yeah.
What role do parents play in your program? And like, how do you keep them from becoming too much? Or I'm sure there's some that are maybe not enough, like everything in between.
Yeah, of course. We run the whole gambit. It starts with trust. We've kind of have a system. We have a history now. They come in now. I don't know if you guys can see behind me. They have the pictures on the walls. They're seeing that we've taken multiple athletes to the national level. So there's a level of trust there. So when they get here, they pretty much stay in their own lane. I haven't found a weightlifting parent yet that like, well, I grew up weightlifting. I've done this for a really long time. I don't know what you guys are doing there. I haven't ran into that yet. It's just weightlifting is just not that common that you see.
Yeah.
I used to see it a lot more in other sports that parents had participated in the sport at some
Especially
point.
wrestling dads. Wrestling dads are gnarly.
Wrestling moms, actually. Wrestling moms.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh. So I haven't run into that because weightlifting is still a relatively sport. They come in, they actually can't really define if it's weightlifting, is it CrossFit, is it a 24-hour fitness gym? They have no idea what actually we're doing. So I do a lot of explaining to them. Fortunately, like I said, I haven't ran into really like outgoing parents. It's more of me having them bring more parents in. It's like, hey, listen, we have this thing, you can be involved, and getting them involved. So I think maybe it's one of my next steps is that we've kind of been talking about is having a master's program and trying to get more parents involved with the sport.
Absolutely.
That's super.
You've developed even coaches, within your youth pipeline. How have you been able to do that? And has there been any structure involved that you've created?
So right now, good coaching is hard to find in the area. Max can attest to this too. Like just finding somebody that can come in, coach the lifts, do well, and understand it and have some passion for it. They're rare breeds. What I've actually been doing is I've have a lot of youth that transition, and we're starting to grow as a group. That I have kids going from high school now to college, and some actually will be attending college near here. So coming back to the gym is not that big of a deal. It's like, cool. Hey, you've been to the system. You know the system. You know the style of the way we lift here and we teach. Come in on the younger kids group and just run the session. And afterwards, you can lift after they're done coaching. And this is a way that like you can give back. And I'll pay you to do it. And your training is now paid for now. You don't have to pay the fee here. So now this is your way to get back to the community of weightlifting that you benefited from. So I've been doing a lot of in-house of some of my youth growing into it. And I think it's great that USAW is giving more opportunities for people to do it. They offer scholarships for a lot of these youth and within our area too. So I try to take advantage of those to let them take their L1s through USAW, but it's worked out really well. I have had a process where I do try to hire coaches outside of the club, just because I'm not there yet to have a full development of coaches yet. So I still need that. So the moment right now, we're still just, hey, like I'll find some on LinkedIn or, whatever hiring websites just to find coaches to fill spots at the moment right now. And we've been pretty successful with that and bringing them in because they don't see much of this ever before work. It's just youth club and that's all we're doing. So I've been able to train them and get them in and coaching kids.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you ever have the sense like when you're going about this to be like, hey, I should actually run a for-profit business out of this? Like I could do a great job. Why am I not doing that? I've been making so much money.
Sometimes, yeah, for sure. But then I look at like, the taxes that are due, and we live in California. The employee taxes are crazy out here, man. So
Yeah,
I enjoy not paying those things at the moment right now. But yeah, sometimes I do because I could benefit from it. But it changes a lot of it too, because then we get our own space. I'm only a youth organization. I'm only filling times between 3 and 8 p.m. at night, right? I got to figure out what I'm gonna do with the rest of the time in the gym. I got to, get that situated and set up. And it gets a little different. Sometimes we do think about it, but I think having us being able to get the brief benefits that we have from a nonprofit just kind of keeps us in line and say, well, actually, this is still working. We're doing really, really well. That's it. As far as me as a coach, I mean, I'm not, like I said, driving Lambos or anything like that, but
right.
I can live my life and still be able to provide the service in the community. It's been really great.
Yeah, it almost
Actually.
sounds like this setup would be ideal if like I mean, I've met coaches who are gym owners and gym owners who are coaches.
Yeah.
And always the coaches who are gym owners, they end up hating the business side, and it probably tanks like their love for the and passion for coaching. And then the gym owners who are coaches, like their coaching product just isn't as good. They're just not passionate about those things. And then they realize that gyms aren't this like crazy business model that could be like crazy successful. It can be successful, but the economies of scale are a little bit different. Maybe the ceiling of opportunity is a little bit lower than other business endeavors, and
Yeah.
stuff like that. I almost feel like for those listening that maybe they're a coach right now that wants to open up a spot, like this could be worth exploring as a way in if you're more passionate about the coaching side of things and you're a little bit fearful around the biz ops. This sounds like it could be a sustainable approach for some people.
Yeah, it can be, if as long as you got like pieces in place that can help and move the needle. I think really what keeps people from doing it is getting set up as a nonprofit. It takes a long time. That front end work, it's a lot of paperwork, and then sustaining it. Like, we have to send our finances in every year so that way they can
Mhm.
post it online. It's like legally we are obliged to do that. Like you can go online and see exactly how much we bring in on these nonprofits websites and see what exactly we do. And we have to make sure we sustain a good balance between how much public funding we get and how much individual fundraising we do and how much donations we get in from certain
Mhm.
organizational companies. If we go too far off of that mark, we can lose our status as a nonprofit in the state of California. So there is a lot of that stuff, and working with a group of people and a board of directors, and you're not the first line to like, okay, we're going to do this and not this, and not being able to do that, you can see we're like, okay, like this is sometimes you have to like think about the bigger picture of what the organization is and you take a back seat to it. And it's not always a really good feeling because sometimes you're like, well, I'm not really crazy about this idea, but the board really likes it. They approve it. Let's give it a shot, right? Let's see how it feels. And so there's a lot of those things that tie into having a nonprofit and having a successful nonprofit and being able to work with people. So, I make it sound like it's all sunshine and rainbows over here, but we deal with a lot of different things. And also like the balance of like, how much do we give? Like because we offer tuition assistance of like, okay, hey, do we give 100% tuition assistance? Is that something we want? How do we deal with that? How do we deal with certain, dynamics and family types and that we have to talk about and do it? So there's a lot of that stuff and nuances that, make it really tough to run a nonprofit.
Definitely. On the
Right.
on the coaching side, one of the topics that we dig into with a lot of coaches is templates and training tracks versus program individualization. Out of curiosity, I believe that you run your groups relatively on training tracks, but do you individualize at some point when an athlete is reaching a certain level in sport?
Yeah, it's almost necessary. No, I think at the level we're at, just with a group of kids that are coming in and lifting, the group is great. Like it's fantastic. They come in, runs like a machine. I don't have to think about it, right? But you have high level athletes. They need to have different stimulances. They require more training, require less training. They require seeing heavyweights more often. They require like more volume, more reps, right? So you kind of have to feed into that if you want to have elite level athletes at some point. And right now for me, I'm following the path of what some of the our youth want or some of our athletes want. And if that's something that they look at and want to do, then I'm going to provide that service as well too, even though that's not part of our mission statement. Like we can do the group training and it's been successful, then great. But you're going to have individuals, and I think that helps push the mark about like, okay, there are things that we can do. There's more to it than just being a really good lifter in your area. There's like way more to it, and it brings a level of commitment and prestige, a pride of being a part of a club that has successful lifters and things of that nature. So I think it brings a little bit of that. It brings a little more nuance to what we do in the area. And then people start getting to noticing that. And when they start noticing that, that's how you get more people in the gym. That's kind of how we started. We had kind of a hero story. We had an athlete, national champion as a youth, and that helped brought in a lot of people, winning sales.
Nice. Nice.
Definitely. What's the long-term vision for Fortified? So like where's this thing going in the next 3 or 5 years?
Hopefully, like I said, like we're reaching our 5-year mark, and that's kind of like the mark where, like, if you're going to die as an organization, like you'll hit that mark, and that's where it is. So I want to get past that 5-year mark first and foremost, and say like, okay, this is great. And for me, there's a couple of things that I would like to see. We're doing a lot of great things with youth. If you can do more with the youth, if we can go from 70 to 90, that'd be great. If I can get to the 100 mark, that'd be amazing, right? That'd be great. I might need a bigger space. Who knows? That's kind of like one of the goals in my mind, to be able to do that, and then be able to provide services for people that do want to compete on like a more international level, and be able to have a system for that, and then provide coaching opportunities, right? You just talked about like how it's hard to find coaches in here, but it's hard to keep coaches and keep paying them what they're worth, right? And like a lot of times we'll have, like, for me, I'll have like part-time coaches that like have a day job, and this is kind of like something that they're doing, they're passionate about in the end. I would love to be able to provide a coaching opportunity if I get into like high school strength and conditioning in our area, and I can bring them on and give them a full-time salary. That would be incredible, to get more coaching opportunities and keep more good coaches within the sport of weightlifting, and keep them part of the national circuit, like at the meets and so forth and so forth, because that's just going to help our sport if we can get more access to coaches. If you have more coaches, we're going to have more athletes, right? So
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's an interesting take. I think a lot of people don't see it that way. They like to point to the idea that like, oh, this sport will take off when we, win a gold medal, when a big athlete comes in, when sponsors, and like the reality is that coaches are probably the biggest driving force for getting people involved, because even if somebody's interested, even if somebody's like wants to be a weightlifter and has some idea, they have to find a coach. They're always going to go find some kind of coach. Even if they do their own program or something like that, they're going to eventually find themselves at a weightlifting gym with a coach. And so it's funny that, it's like you guys really get that, like that you have to start somewhere with that. So growing some kind of coaching thing, coaching business, coaching mentorship, coaching kind of track to like bring your athletes that are done competing into the folds of like, now you're a coach. How much of what you guys have done now has kind of built a foundation where you've built some kind of not just the business structure, but the system of like how you actually teach a lifter and coach people and like do that? Is that a organic thing that you just kind of, fall into, or do you have like an actual structure of like, hey, here's how to be a coach, here's how to coach people?
yes, I do, and I actually should put it out on paper, and I actually have already set like a manual. But I do.
Right.
I've been coaching for 20 years in so many different facets in sports. Like, and my number one thing with coaching, and it actually is less of what you know, but how you communicate. Like I always tell people, like, coaching is like 90% communication. Like it's about 10% of what you know. Like I've seen coaches that like know nothing about weightlifting go get a world champion, right? Like, so like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you've never done weightlifting competitively, but give an athlete. But I think, like I said, their communication skills were probably the reason why that athlete is doing very, very well and teaching the basics. And we do have a structure of like how we want to teach it, how we want to approach it, right? We follow like mostly the European model, like how we, approach our lists and things of that nature. But when it comes down to like just coaching, right? Like I really try to hammer in that communication piece for our coaches, and to understand that, because if you can communicate and build a really good rapport, you're going to have somebody who's going to stick around for a lot longer.
Definitely.
Nice.
All right. I want to move you to our rapid fire question segment. All right. One exercise every youth athlete should master.
Ooh, one youth exercise every youth athlete should master. A core related stability exercise. Like it would be like a plank holding a band from the opposite end. I'll say that.
Cool. I dig it. Biggest misconception of youth training.
They have good recovery systems. They can do heavy lifts every day and not get hurt.
Nice.
Fair. Hardest age group to coach, middle, higher, elementary.
That middle school age, man. That middle school.
It's just because the brain, they're
100%.
pushing against the grain.
Middle school, there's a lot going on.
Okay, finish this sentence. A great youth coach is someone who blank.
Builds rapport and trust.
Love it,
That's
man.
good.
Ed, thanks for being on the show, brother.
Hey, man, I appreciate it, man. And thank you very much for having me on.
100%. Appreciate it.
Yeah.